Let me say my greeting. Good morning to our friends in North and South America. Good afternoon to our friends in the UK and Europe. Good early evening to our friends in the Arab states and India. Good evening to our friends in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia. Good late evening to our friends in Australia. Hope you're all well. Nice to see you. JC, we have some questions.
Question 1, dear Ajahn. I had a cold for more than a week. During that period, I find it very hard to maintain mindfulness and very hard to arouse effort to practice meditation. My mind just proliferated endlessly, indulging in watching YouTube and have very low energy to maintain in wholesome mindful state. Do you have any advice on how to practice when one is not feeling well? Thank you.
The first thing I would say is to support the body in fighting an infection, because that will make the experience less exhausting. So if it's something like a cold or a flu, if you're taking enough vitamin C, vitamin zinc, and echinacea, for example, so you support the body so that it's not as exhausted, that can be very helpful. Vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D can also be helpful if it's virus. And echinacea, these kind of herbs, drink lots of, as you know, warm water. All Chinese people know when you have a cold, you have to sip warm water. So we do that. And I find lying down, setting the intention to be aware of the breath, lying down and doing metta meditation can be very helpful, because you don't have to think about much, but it does give you something to do. And may I be well, may I be happy. There is normally some feeling of suffering. So there is an object, there is a sentient being that has some suffering. And so it's okay to respond to that sentient being's challenges with metta. And it's interesting you mentioned watching a lot of YouTube videos. When I had COVID in India in December 2019, I didn't know it was COVID because we hadn't heard the word yet. I was part of the first batch of the. I ended up watching a bunch of YouTube videos too. I go, what can I do? What can I do to make my mind wholesome? I was stuck in the guest house, and the guest house had Wi-Fi, and there was some really nice. There is nice stuff that you can watch, which is wholesome, right? So it was close to Christmas, and there was this bunch of Secret Santa clips from, I think it was Idaho. So for some reason, the YouTube algorithm suggested that I watch the Secret Santa clips from Idaho. And I did, one after another. And it was really, really nice. These kind of people getting surprised, like some secret kind of millionaire. People are able to write in and suggest a person who might be worthy of a gift. And then Secret Santa comes, sometimes gives them a new car or gives them a new house sometimes, or renovates the house, all various things. And it's very, very touching. Oh, human beings, there are nice human beings who do kind things for people. And you can, it became a kind of a mudita practice and kind of wiping away a few tears with kind of joy and Christmas spirit and all of that. So, if you are kind of stuck in bed and you you don't have much energy and you do have the option to do some YouTube viewing, then it's possible to look at wholesome things that inspire you about what is possible. That's a whole kind of genre, random acts of kindness. There's like thousands, probably millions of those clips on YouTube. So you can make it a kind of an easy mudita and metta and mudita practice. But yeah, I found the lying down and breathing in, may I be well, breathing out, may I be happy, and holding the metta in the body. I think that probably speeds up the healing as well. It's another. Meditation does have wholesome effect on the immune system. So I remember writing my journal at the time, because if I lay on my back, I had asthma-like symptoms, but if I lay on my stomach, I could breathe. And I had a dry cough, and I remember writing in my journal, it's as though my body's trying to cough something up, but nothing's coming up. And then when I was back in Thailand, a couple of months later, reading the symptoms of COVID, difficulty breathing and dry cough, high fever. And but after 3 days, I was back under the Bodhi tree, and I was meditating for 8 hours a day with my dry cough, and probably giving COVID to other people without knowing it. But so yeah, I was already taking zinc, magnesium, vitamin C, and echinacea. So after 3 days, I had enough energy to get back and be under the Bodhi tree and keep up meditating. So I really do think the supplements help. In my experience, they do. And yes.
Question 2, dear Ajahn. What is the best thing to do if somebody verbally or physically attack me?
The person asking this question lives in a country where she's a woman, and she lives in a country where women have less freedom and rights than in many other countries. So I'm actually not sure. I don't have experience of living in a country like that, so I'm not actually perfectly sure what the right advice is. So for myself, it's in Australia. If you're a woman and somebody is physically attacking you, you call the police and they come. And if it's an ongoing thing, there will be a what do they call that thing? A kind of the person won't be allowed to come physically, a restraining order. The person isn't allowed to come physically near you, and it's quite strongly enforced in that country. So also in Australia, there are. I mean, it's not always men hitting women. There often is. Sometimes women hit men too, but there are defensive, like martial arts classes to protect oneself. So, if it was an Australian person, I would say, go and learn self-defense. And if someone dares to come after you, throw them over your shoulder or poke them in the eye or whatever, that would be the Aussie proactive kind of thing to do. Really learn how to, because a lot of the people who abuse people, bullies, they're not experts in martial arts, and the martial arts do train people, particularly the ones like Aikido, how to get out of the way and how to. But I don't know if that's a possibility in this country either. So, in terms of practice, if the person's often verbally abusive and it's somebody that you live with, then in terms of like just being really determined to take it on as a vipassana practice, like in the hearing, there is just the heard. So you place the awareness on the ear consciousness. In the hearing, there is the heard, and you note hearing, and it's possible then that you don't have to take on the story, you don't have to believe the story, you don't have to believe what that person's saying, you don't have to be a self that feels abused. You're just aware noise is affecting the ear base, it's arising, it's staying for some time, it's ceasing. So one can develop a real determination to do that. It's like, okay, there may be some abusive speech coming my way today. So after your morning meditation, you set the intention, I'm going to be mindful of sound affecting the ear base, and not take it personally, not pick it up. All sorts of things you can do. Like, this person is bringing me a gift, I don't accept the gift. It's like you can train yourself to, this is not a gift that I want. You're offering it to me, but I don't accept it. We can do some inner work so that it really is just noise, and we don't take it on. But of course, if one lives in a situation where there is domestic abuse, and if it's not actually possible to escape it, sometimes fighting back makes the situation more dangerous for oneself. So this is a tricky area, and I wish I knew exactly what the situation was, and I wish I could help. So yes, we have compassion for the situation, and we wish this person well, and hopefully it's not too bad, and hopefully you can develop wisdom and kind of wear out the karma. Sometimes when we don't retaliate, we're not making fresh karma. That karma will eventually resolve itself. So we have metta for you. We wish you well. All the best. If it was me, I'd probably go and learn Aikido. If I couldn't get out of the situation.
Question 3, dear Ajahn. I used to have a lot of faith in something. Since a young age, I have had dreams where I was guided. I was told about things that will happen, warned of things dangerous people, etc. I started to be interested in meditation in my teenage years, although my background is Catholic. Some years ago, when I made the commitment to start to meditate daily, I started to have strange dreams and strange interactions with animals, especially with cats. I don't like cats. They started to come close to me. Suddenly one night, after a dream with a cat, I felt someone said to me that there was immense power in me. It was like an idea in my mind saying all this time it was me. Then I asked who I have been praying to, who has been guiding me all this time, saving me from danger. I did have some dangerous situations to navigate. Since then, my faith was lost. I felt lost. I'm getting better, but what do you think happened and how can I recover my faith?
So I just, this person has had an experience of feeling as though a divine presence was assisting them with kind of inner promptings to help them navigate difficult situations or avoid harm. And then at some point, that sense of that presence is no longer there. And this person had a sense, she uses the word faith. I guess another word would be trust. And how can she get her faith back? To get one's trust back. So there's a few interesting things there. So, you know, a lot of people have an intuitive sense. I'm sure many of us have that feeling of, so sometimes it's just a feeling, and we have that sense of, I better trust that feeling. There's something about that particular quality of feeling that I need to honor. And some people are more intuitive than others, but most people, human beings, have a kind of a gut sense for when something's right for them or not right for them. And I had I had quite a lot of that. It didn't manifest so much as a voice, but strong feelings. For example, I just knew that for myself, I shouldn't go to university. Although I was accepted to university, I had a place to go, I had a place to stay. And I just had a strong feeling, don't go. Similarly, with driving a car, there was just a really strong feeling, don't get a car. Don't even learn to drive. And for an young Australian man, that's a bit unusual in those days. And of course, as it happened a couple of years later, I developed an interest in Buddhism. I want to go to Thailand. I don't have car payments. I don't have university debt. I don't have 3 more years of my degree. I can go. Some kind of sense of maintaining freedom and autonomy so that when the opportunity opened up to get back to practice, I was able to do that. So I was happy that I honored those feelings. And that's one of those things you couldn't quite explain it to other people. And my parents in particular, why don't you go to university, etc. And then there were other times where it was a bit more extreme. I was on a bus with my best friend at the time, going down to the meditation center on Koh Phangan Island. And we were heading from Bangkok to Surat Thani. It was an overnight bus. It was going very fast. We were probably both in a bit of a half asleep state. And I heard this voice clear as day resound in my ear. There is a chance that you are about to die, which woke me up. And then this bus swerved and a very large truck whizzed past us and missed us, I think, by millimeters. And the whole bus just kind of shook. And I turned to my friend and I said, Debbie, I just heard this voice in my ear that said there's a serious chance that you're about to die. And what do you think she said? She said, I heard the same voice say the same thing. So what is that, right? Like we're half asleep, we're in a foreign country. And so I would assume that that's some kind of a guardian angel that we weren't aware of, but in that moment we were aware of it. And why would such a being tell you? Because if you die in a sleepy, confused state, your chances of having a good rebirth are less. If you die in a mindful state, I knew this was coming, then your chances of moving on from that experience to a better situation are higher. So somebody was trying to help us, just warning us just in case. And I remember there was another time when I was doing this 10-day meditation retreat, and we were in second day, and we're doing walking meditation. And I'd already done a couple of the Vipassana Goenka retreats in Australia. And there's a voice came up. This is the voice of Mikey Laser saying, okay, I'm going to get back to the meditation. I get it. But now I want to go to the beach. Now I want to go to the, I want to go back to the beach. And I heard a voice speak to me clear as day and say, if you don't pace up and down here, it said several things. It says, yeah, if you don't pace up and down here, you'll be pacing up and down at one of three places: a jail, a mental institution, or an HIV ward. And then because I've told this to you before, I have a creative, artistic temperament, and I have a bit of an intuition that I was going to be either very good or very not good. And fortunately, I chose being very good. And then this voice says, we got you here, now do the work. And I'm like, oh. And I did take heed. And then sure enough, by day 7, I realized this monastery, this meditation center had a program where people could be what they called puchue, people who helped, where you could help the teachers host a retreat for 1 month, and then the next month you could sit the retreat and do maintenance work and welcoming people and cleaning and etc. And I ended up signing up and spent 5 months in that place, and it was enormously helpful to my process and development. So if I had run away, that would have been a big mistake. And having stuck to it and then realized, no, this is really what I need to be doing and what I should be doing. And so I'm very grateful. So I have some experience myself of the occasional voice, which is wise and helpful. So I don't hear that question and think this person's crazy. I think this may be a real phenomenon. I think people who have cultivated virtue in the past probably do have some celestial beings who keep an eye on them. Most people don't have a guardian angel that's there all the time. You really need to have quite a bit of merit and parami, accumulated virtue, to have a full-time guardian angel. But you may have, probably most people have beings that keep an eye on one from time to time, and maybe through difficult times. So, I would say it's probably real. If this influence has helped this person navigate difficult situations, then it was real. This person also mentioned that at a younger age she was Catholic, and then later on she started practicing Buddhism. So it may be the case that that may have been a deva, and that may have been a Catholic deva. And then when you started to practice Buddhism, the Catholic deva had a sense of they were going to go and take care of another Catholic. I don't know. There probably are kind of tag teams, and the devas may have preferences in who they take care of, or just resonances with certain practices. And so if you stop praying in a certain way and you start doing other spiritual practices, then the subtle supportive energies do change around you. But in terms of how does one get one's faith back, then I would say what we all need to do is put our faith where it needs to be. And that's in Lord Buddha, and that's in the Dhamma, in the practice of the Eightfold Path, in cultivating dana, sila, and bhavana, the generosity, the ethics, and the mental cultivation. That's what we have faith in. And we have faith in our potential to realize the same liberation as the Buddha and the Arahants. That's, if one commits to the 5 precepts and does daily meditation and really has a strong quality of faith, that is enormously protective. It really is. And then if we add on top of that daily chanting, if we can, then more protection. And so, I don't know what happened to the influence, but sometimes, devas also have a lifespan. that being may have had to go and be born somewhere else. If it was a deva, maybe they made a certain amount of good karma and their situation got better. Maybe they got a promotion. It's like, we don't know. But that does happen in the subtle bodied realms. The rebirth is faster. If a deva makes a lot of good karma, all of a sudden they can jump up a realm. And in the higher realms, it's less easy to have contact with human beings. So the kind of devas that one might hear close by, maybe more like the Bhumma devas, the Ruka devas, the devas in the realm of the four kings, the lower heaven realm. If a being is reborn in a higher, more subtle form realm, then it is harder to have contact with human beings, and harder for human beings to, everything's so subtle. It's harder for the ordinary mind to hear them. They might try to speak to us, but we might not hear what they're saying because our system might not yet be refined enough, etc. So I wouldn't worry about it. I'd just be grateful for the assistance that I did receive. And I would try to train myself to trust that as long as I'm doing good, avoiding harm and purifying my mind, there will be protective influences, whether I can see them or not. And put your faith in Buddha, in Dhamma, in the path of practice, and then keep practicing. But I like cats.
Question for Ajahn, do you think there's a place for gender non-conforming people to want to become Theravada monastics? The Vinaya consists of the rules as they became necessary, possibly even added some time after the Buddha's life. Pandaka and Ubatthop-Janaka are found in the Kandakas, and the words do not appear in the early suttas, nor in the oldest parts of the Vinaya. The question remains as to why these rules were added, possibly after the Buddha. I appreciate your thoughts on this.
So in Thailand, in every village where I've lived close to, there's usually a boy that likes to wear girls' clothes and makeup. It's like, and that seems to be in Thai culture tolerated. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting to notice that in Thailand, that the parents don't freak out and try to force the child to be a certain way. They kind of make jokes, and they kind of let the boy who likes to dress in dresses and wear makeup do that. And sometimes, like recently, one of the girls in the village where I go for alms each day, one of our main supporters, she told her parents that she prefers girls. She's about 15, I think. She cuts her hair short like a boy. And in Thailand, sometimes, I have some lesbian students, and they when they write emails or messages to me, they finish their message with cup instead of ka. So it just means they're choosing the male polite particle rather than the female, because they just, whatever, they feel more masculine, so they use the masculine polite particle. And so that seems to be pretty normal in this culture, and people don't seem to make a problem out of it. And so gender non-conforming, I'm assuming that that's what it means, that a person has been born in a female body but feels more like a man, or somebody has been born in a male body but feels like a woman. And that certainly happens in every culture, in every point of history. That's part of what some human beings experience. Is there a space for such people in Theravada monasticism? That's a complex question. The Theravada monastic order is conservative. It's one of the reasons it's lasted 2,600 years is it's not a form that is amenable to being changed very much. And that is a large part of why it has endured. The thing that comes up for me, though, is the sense of becoming a monk or becoming a nun isn't really about gender. It's like once you become a monk, in a way, we're wearing something that looks quite a bit like a skirt and a long flowing billowy robe. So it's not like when you become a monk, you are uber macho. And when you become a monk, you become a monk. You don't become necessarily a male monastic. It's not, as far as I can tell, it's not really about gender. But in terms of like the gender non-conforming person, if somebody born in a female body is willing to become a nun and keep the nun's rules, there is a space in Theravada monastic form for that person. Similarly, if someone may have a male body but feel more female, but if they are willing to become a monk and keep the monk's rules, the point is we're not trying to identify as a man or identify as a woman, but if you choose to be a monk, you do identify as a monk. If you choose to be a nun, you identify as a nun. What does that mean? You have to keep the monk's rules. You have to keep the nun's rules. But one of the things I really like about the monastic life, in my experience, at least of the Thai forest tradition, is that we get to cultivate all sorts of what might be traditionally feminine and masculine activities and qualities. It seems to be a situation where a lot of balance, you can develop a kind of a balanced being where you have access to female and male archetypal energies. So, for example, junior monks mop floors, sew robes, tend to their elders, like clean the kuti of their elder. So a lot of tasks that may have been considered domestic, the domestic tasks the junior monks do perform for the senior members. And in doing so, developing a bit of empathy, a bit of tenderness, paying attention to other people's needs, supporting other people. So quite feminine qualities. At the same time, when there's a building project, the monks mix concrete, schlep stones, get blisters, get sunburned. And so there's time to be tender and there's a time to be tough. And I really appreciate this about the monastic life, that I can sew a robe, string a lovely pair of prayer beads, make a fragrance puja of fragrant oils and roses, all quite kind of soft activities, I suppose. Or I can design a chedi and supervise the building of a chedi, which is 900 tons. And, you know, I really appreciate that about my life, that there are all sorts of activities that I can cultivate, which help me to cultivate a well-rounded, many skills, a capacity to empathize, be sensitive, and a capacity to sock it down and just sit for another 2 hours with pain. But I don't see that as being particularly male. I don't come to any of these activities and think, I'm going to be a real man. It's just a monk doing his duties. And I would assume it's the same with a nun. With a nun, they do her duties. And I think the most important thing is, you know, we human beings can identify with anything. And when we identify with things, we suffer. So the point is, whatever our particular karma is, and whatever our confusions are we willing to investigate our attachments? Are we willing to see the way our attachments cause us suffering? And are we willing to try to let go of our attachments? One of the wonderful things about the monastic form is that it just forces that. It's not about acting on your preferences. The morning bell goes at 3, you go to the morning chanting. Doesn't matter if you feel like a man or a woman, you go to the chanting and you chant. It's time to sweep the leaves, you sweep the leaves. And you go on arms round, it's time for arms round, you go on arms round, otherwise you don't eat. And it's very simple. And so it's often about renunciation and then also investigation. So whatever we identify, even identifying as being a monk can cause suffering. One has to understand the conventions, what they were designed for, how to work with them. But a large part of the monastic convention is for seeing where one is attached and learning to be less attached. That's what it was designed by the Buddha for. So, and in terms of gender dysmorphia, some people feel more feminine, sometimes more masculine, other times. In terms of having a commitment to practicing with that, that could be a ripe situation for developing insight, really. Rather than trying to grasp it and make it a permanent or a solid thing, and rather than trying to make the people around you support you in that, which is one way to relate to it, one can notice the way it changes. And when the mind is peaceful, there's no male, there's no female, there's no sexuality, there's no orientation, there's a body and there's feelings. And if one is committed, this is the thing about wanting to be a Theravada monastic, are you committed to cultivating the 4 foundations of mindfulness? Can you see a form as a form? Not male or female. Can you see a feeling as a feeling? Arising, staying for some time. Can you see a nama dhamma, an aramana, a mind state as a mind state? Arising, staying for some time, ceasing, not I, not mine, not self. Then if the person can embrace those practices and embrace these conventions with a determination to let go of attachments and to train in being humble and modest, then there is a place for such people. But it all comes down to how sincere are we about practicing? How much can we take responsibility for what our attachments are? How willing are we to be a bit flexible, be a bit humble and let go of our attachments? And we're also training in not identifying, trying to not identify with things. The monastic conventions are to help us do that. And so we try not to identify with the body completely. We try not to identify with our thoughts. We try not to identify with our feelings. We try to observe them, arising, staying for some time due to conditions, and ceasing. So anyway, I hope something I said may have been helpful. We all have to practice with, I think it's a normal part of human experience to feel a bit confused, whatever your situation is. Like men who might be what this person used the word gender nonconforming, but a conforming man probably has confusion about his masculinity at times, or what his role is as a man. A conforming woman has confusion about what it means to be a woman and how to be a woman. So human beings have confusion. And mindfulness, that's why we cultivate mindfulness, is to bring more clarity to the situation, and to try to not get lost in we don't want to be trying to rearrange the furniture on the decks of the Titanic. We're trying to get off the Titanic because the Titanic is going to sink. So it's like, this is where we take responsibility and set a determination to see a form as a form, feelings as feelings, thoughts as thoughts, mind states as mind states, not I, not mine. And with regards, and contemplating unsatisfactoriness, that's the First Noble Truth. It's actually never the case that you get some conditions in samsara and you feel perfectly content and perfectly happy and everything's okay, and everybody supports you in that. That is never the case. So feeling some confusion, some frustration is the samsaric situation. And so we don't put our emphasis on trying to fix the external so much. We as practitioners, our focus is upon investigating our attachments and learning how to identify less with thoughts and feelings and forms, and cultivate a sense of spaciousness and clarity that is okay with seeing things arise, stay for some time and cease, arise, stay for some time and cease. So hope something in there is helpful. Whatever your situation, please practice mindfulness and have metta for yourself, support yourself in the process.
Question 5, dear Ajahn, can Ajahn allow the chants of the suttas with text on the YouTube channel? so that we can chant with the Ajahn anytime you want. Thank you.
The Dhamma Chakra is already up with the words, and I think Aparajita has a long-term project. He's doing the Anattalakkhana Sutta as well, I think. So it depends in some degree upon how much help I have. So when people help me to do this, I can do it, yes.
Question 6. Dear Ajahn, can you please speak about equanimity? Is there a practice to cultivate equanimity, or is it the result of cultivating the other three Brahmaviharas? Thank you.
So in our path of dana, sila, and bhavana, generosity, maintaining ethical standards and mental cultivation, this all supports the cultivation of equanimity. So when we're practicing generosity, we're going against the grain a little bit. Sometimes we go against the greed a bit. And, with the precepts in particular, it's not that we don't want to break them. It's that we're making a commitment not to breaking the precepts. And so what happens is when the desire to do something comes up, but it's against the precepts, you can't do it. And this is the beginning of equanimity. It's like, that's the beginning. And keeping the mind in the middle, equipoise, balanced. When you break a precept, the mind loses its balance. So it falls into some sensuality or some ill will or aversion or some intoxication. So when we make a commitment to keeping the precepts, or keeping the mind within parameters, this is the beginning. This is what makes it possible to have equanimity. But the meditation is where we really get a lot of practice. Because when we have the hindrances, as we all do, when we come to sit, we're aiming at recognizing a hindrance and putting it down, not feeding it, not giving energy to it. And what happens is when there's less hindrance, or the hindrance goes away, the mind is experiencing some equipoise, some balance. And so equanimity isn't indifference. Equanimity is equipoise, it's balance. Ultimately, equanimity is the fourth jhana, which is pure equanimity, but that's not where we start. When you get some samadhi, 5 minutes of kanika samadhi, 20 minutes of upachara samadhi, there is equanimity in the experience, a sense of balance, and that equanimity becomes more powerful and becomes pure equanimity. But even in that 5 minutes of peacefulness, there's some equanimity, because the mind isn't being swayed into liking or not liking. It's being peaceful. And so when we can take on extra practices that force us to develop a bit more equanimity, particularly sitting with pain, for example. So normally, if you're going to, there's a bit of pain and after 5 minutes you move. If you want to develop more equanimity, you just say to yourself, okay, 10 minutes. And you don't let yourself move, and you practice with the pain, and you practice not moving while you're aware of pain. This is increasing equanimity. It might not be increasing equanimity if you're kind of gritting your teeth and sweating, and then it's just willfulness. But there's things that you can do. So suppose the pain reaches a certain threshold, you really want to move, and you say 10 more breaths. So it's like breathing in 1, breathing out 1, breathing in 2, breathing out 2. Normal breaths, not fast breaths. Like you really practice with it. And many people have the experience when they get to the 10th breath that they can go a bit longer. And it's like, okay, so sit for 5 more minutes, the pain comes back again, and you do it again, 10 more breaths. This is one of the ways that we develop out, and it really does that capacity to not to shrink from pain and not to react quickly. Every single time we do that, it is developing that ability, so that when it's an unpleasant sound or an unpleasant taste or an unpleasant feeling in the body, we have that ability now to not immediately react and to make the mind a bit more spacious and to take a few more breaths. So sitting longer and sitting more often, I have great faith, cultivates a lot of equanimity. And equanimity is not something that's easy to cultivate. It takes work. But the more we practice, the more equanimity we have. go and practice in Bodh Gaya for a month. You will have many opportunities to cultivate equanimity. Noises, smells, insects.
Question 7. Hi Ajahn. May I know if the feelings of intuition the same as gut feelings, and if we can trust our intention of our intuition? Thank you.
So it is tricky, isn't it? It is tricky because it's subtle, amorphic. So can we trust our intuition and can we trust our intentions? So, we have to have mindfulness and clear comprehension. So the more mindfulness we develop, then one gets more discernment around, is that something trustworthy or is that something untrustworthy? And also with regards intention, like sometimes we can delude ourselves. We can think, we can just, like there's a justifying part of the mind, like my intentions are good, but underneath there might be something else. I really want this. I really don't want that. There might be an agenda, some willfulness, but the more clarity, the more mindfulness that we develop, and the more metta that we cultivate. So metta is very powerful and very important, because when you have true loving kindness in the heart, that's like a tuning fork, and you notice when something isn't that. And it's like a background that you become familiar with, so that if there's some kind of a justifying mind, or if there's something a bit unwholesome there, the mindfulness and the metta is a kind of like a spotlight, helps you see things more clearly. So, but largely it's trial and error, and there's no kind of simple answer. Like, can you trust your intentions? Can you trust your intuition? I don't know. You have to pay attention to what happens when you do. And okay, I had a strong intuition. I trusted it. Were the results good? I think my intentions are pure, so I'm going to act on it. Okay, look at what the result was. And as some time passes, when you look back on that, this is one of the iddhipadas, the basis for success. The fourth one is reviewing. You have to look back. How did that go? So maybe make notes. If you're a little bit unclear about your intention, or a little bit unclear about an intuition, like make a journal entry. As far as I can tell, this is what the best thing to do is, and this is what my intention is, and this is what my intuition is, and I'm going to trust that. And then come back to it. How did it go? And, one of those things, subtle mental phenomenon. The power of delusion, that the problem with delusion is that it deludes us. And when we're deluded, we're deluded. And when we're deluded, we don't know. Oh, I'm deluded. No, if you knew you were deluded, you wouldn't be deluded. So it's like the problem with delusion is when you feel it feels right. You feel like you're doing the right thing. And then normally in samsara, if something unwholesome was involved, there's some kind of pain. And then you have to review the situation and say, oh, looks like actually my intentions weren't so pure. And look what happened. I hurt myself, or I hurt someone else. And so, we have to be truthful, and we have to keep reviewing, but we set the best intentions we can, and we do our best, and we keep learning from when we wake up from our delusions. When the more mindfulness we have, we're able to see delusion in more and more subtle layers. So at the beginning, it's quite coarse, and we do justify all sorts of unwholesome things. And as we develop more mindfulness and more strict with the precepts and develop more clarity, we begin to see, no, actually, that's not wholesome. No, I really shouldn't do that. No, I shouldn't justify this thing that I'm justifying. And it's a little bit uncomfortable, but that discomfort is very important part of what helps us to do better. This integrity that we develop, that kind of sense for what truly is virtuous. It's almost like it has a fragrance. Apparently virtue has a fragrance that the devas can smell. They can smell virtue. And I think your own sense for am I truly virtuous? Is this really virtuous? Probably we can use the word smell, but your own kind of gut sense for, you can smell when it's a bit off, right? And your sense of smell, intuitive integrity will develop. The precepts are important. The regular meditation is important. The truthfulness is important. And then working with the discomfort as we become better people, all part of the process.